So, welcome to episode 35 of the Perigee Podcast. I'm your host, Chief Master Sergeant of Space Force, John Bentivegna. I'm coming to you live from the Space Force Association SPACEPOWER Conference in Orlando, Florida. This is the second annual that we're at. So joining me today, we have some very special and esteemed colleagues and teammates. We're excited to bring you their insights and perspectives on a range of timely topics. So we're going to start with some introductions, and then we'll start getting into a discussion and conversation. So ma'am, if I could turn it over to you, please tell us a little bit of kind of who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name's Captain Colleen O'Hara. Currently, I work at the NRO Operations Center at Fort Belvoir, and there I am a mission director as well as the executive officer for our Delta Commander, Colonel Schrader. Don't tell him I said that. And
you won't listen to the podcast.
Before that, I was at Cape Cod Space Force Station. I was the flight commander of weapons and tactics there. I absolutely loved that assignment, and I loved doing all of the innovation that I got to do being in that office. I have my undergrad in communication, so I always like doing these kind of things. I think communication is a super important aspect of what we do, and so I'm really happy I get to be here today and communicate things in the Space Force.
Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Chief. I'm Master Sergeant Mike Sullivan. I'm the First Sergeant for Space Training Readiness Command. People are my business. People are my passion. Anything that I can do to just take care of our force, our brothers and sisters, and all the other services, things like that, that's really what I focus on. So this is a great opportunity. I was mentioning this earlier, but I'm actually really excited to hear the perspective of my teammates here at the table, because sometimes conversations get a little siloed within our peer group. So I'm thrilled that, sitting around me are just these POVs that I'll say I think that's what they say on TikTok nowadays. My POV now is a different perspective that we can bring to the table. So really excited.
If you want a TikTok reference.
Trying to stay hip, sir.
Can we blank that out? I don't know if we can say that.
Thanks for the introduction. And so a little bit about me. So Specialist Barnes. I originally was in the Air Force. So I IST'd for Trench 3. My background with Air Force was geospatial intelligence, and then I IST'd over, and now with the 76th ISRS. And we moved from geospatial intelligence now my focus is all source intelligence, but shifting into what that is all source, right? So I'm now looking at MASINT, learning MASINT, and kind of bringing that to the table operationally for Space Force. I have to admit, I never really saw myself wanting to, there's a part of me that wanted to enlist, but I did the civilian world for a while. And then finally one day, my dad would talk about it and remind me every now and then, because he was in the service with Air Force. And then finally one day I said, all right, I'll make the call. And it's been a blast ever since. I come from a pretty blue family, fourth generation military service. My great grandfather, he started Air Army Corps. And it's been a blast to have the name go from Air Army Corps, Air Force, and now Space Force.
Cool. Man, what a journey.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kendrick.
All right, yeah. My name's Jonathan Fraser. I'm an engineer for the 4th Space Operations Squadron. I'm, I guess, now a team lead there for our satellite command and control system, ground engineer. Before that, I was just at California Polytechnic, San Luis Obispo University, studying mechanical engineering. Force House was my first job, been there about a year. So
I love you say you were just there studying mechanical engineering out in SLO. That's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
Hey, I'm actually really excited about this actually demographic for the Perigee Podcast, right? Especially because, we're at this SPACEPOWER conference. So we've had a lot of keynotes, a lot of opportunity to engage, but, a lot of the discussions about, Space Force culture and identity, kind of who we are. And man, what a great representation, right, of the Space Force, right? All of us guardians, right? But we have civilian guardian, officer guardian, junior enlisted guardian, senior NCO guardian. So this is great, right? Because, we talk about, your POV, is that what you said?
My POV.
But to kind of get some perspectives, and I think it's going to lead to hopefully a really good dynamic kind of discussion today from a perspectives that kind of share what's on our, kind of things that's going on in service, but also from kind of where our little foxholes are. So I think that's really cool. So the first thing I'm going to throw out there is, so we're at the Space Force Association's second annual Space Power Conference, right? It's really Space Force focused, space domain focused. How you guys enjoying it? What do you think? I'm just throw it out there, see who grabs it. Like I said, courage is one of our values.
So I'll start off. I just want to say it's been a blast. I think one thing that I really appreciate with Space Force is how much we value each other. And no matter what rank or position, I felt like I've been welcomed to chat with anyone and kind of learn more and see from other people in the field. So it's been a lot of fun so far.
Any other thoughts? Has anyone been to, so ma'am, have you attended other conferences before?
No, I've been in for 9 years, and I was saying that right when I showed up. I'm like, how have I never been to a conference before? Any conference.
Yeah.
And no, this is my first one. Something I actually am hoping to see in future conferences, though, is the moderators of the keynotes, I think, should be young guardians. I think that would be an amazing opportunity. I'm going to say captain and below because I want to be a part of it too. But, and then we'll go. Right, exactly. I think it would be a great opportunity to give people public speaking and to engage directly with our senior leaders and what they're thinking. And I think more people would be into the chats too. Now that I know Specialist Barnes, if he was up there and giving a speech, I'd be like, I have to go. I know him. I know he's going to do awesome, and I want to be there to support him. I think there would be more buy-in for some of the conversations that we were having. And they can be, we can help generate conversations, but I feel like I would be more engaged if I got to see young guardians up there moderating those conversations.
Did you see the panel yesterday where they had, was moderating, they had kind of junior enlisted?
Yeah, and that was my favorite one that I've seen so far.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I love those, and I'm glad that we had a chance to do it again this year, but to kind of get that perspective. Some of them, I think they were OGs, right? Original Guardians, or kind of, enlisted or commissioned directly into the Space Force. And to kind of, hear their why and their perspective on things. It, for me, is very interesting and meaningful to get a chance to do that. So, I agree with you. I think there's, it's great to, General Saltzman, talked about the space truths yesterday. And I think there's, definitely room and goodness in that, but also, right, to kind of have the perspective from other individuals, or at least more involvement. Like, maybe the fireside chat is a captain interviewing General Saltzman, right? To kind of add some of that perspective and flavor to it would also be fun. So
I'd also love to see more breakout sessions where it was, something in a room like this, no more than 20 people, and we get to engage with you directly, and it's a personal conversation. I don't know how that logistically would work with everyone having to, you probably would be exhausted by the end of the day if you're constantly in a room like that. But I think in that big room, it's very easy to lose what's happening. But if you have conversations, and you get to connect with people in the room too, and look people in the eye. And I think that, I thought that's what the conference was going to be. I've loved learning, but yeah, I think more breakouts and more moderation from young guardians would be next level.
Well, I'm glad you had a chance to kind of experience and come to this one, kind of give you some of that, perspective, and hopefully now this will inspire you to come to other opportunities that, several of the support organizations that host these type of events, to kind of get a flavor, because they're all a little different, to be honest with you. But that's what makes going maybe to a couple a year, if you can make it, kind of makes it really intriguing and get a little bit of development and opportunity each one. So, Messer, have you been to any of them?
Chief, I've been to at least one for each of our, I'll say, like major supporting organizations, AFA, AFSA, Space Force Association, and I think 95% of the goodness happens off stage. So facilitating that opportunity to go guardian to guardian or guardian to industry. Actually, I want to flip that industry to guardian, so that way they get that opportunity to see our perspective as operators. So something like Space Force Association is just a little bit more special because it feels like it's for guardians by guardians. But the great thing is it's still joint. I've seen soldiers, Marines, some of our allied partners out there. So it still has that reach, but I want to say there was something like 1,100 Guardians registered to come to this event. Whereas if you go to AFA, it's definitely very Air Force with, personally, I think a little sprinkling of Space Force just to maybe keep the right people interested. And then I'm always partial to the Air Force Sergeant Association. Although it says Air Force Sergeant Association, it's a joint organization. They're always up on the Hill advocating for us. And I think that's probably twofold for these kinds of events. Is it's what are they doing for us here in person, facilitating those conversations, but then also we need to support them when they go up to the Hill and they're advocating on our behalf when it comes to quality of life or policy change that is affecting how we do our daily jobs.
Jonathan, I'm really curious to get your perspective, right?
So,
when we talk about how small the Space Force is, but like a third of us are civilian guardians.
Really? Yeah, really.
Right?
I didn't know there was that many.
Yeah, so I think there's almost about, if you break it up, it's almost about about 5,000 officers, about 5,000 enlisted, almost about 5,000 civilian guardians, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, those numbers aren't exact, but it's almost a third, and a third.
Yeah. I think I've really enjoyed going. If I had to pick something that I didn't love and something I liked, I think that some of the panels, I don't know what to call them, maybe talks, just get like, just all buzzwords, just gets bogged down with buzzwords, and it's kind of all that's going on. And maybe I just am not tracking it because I'm too new, but some of those felt that way. But I would say one of the things I really enjoyed was just like seeing you and CSO, getting to see faces. I mean, I'm Spock, so seeing General Miller, I've never seen him talk. Seeing all that was super good to just get to see your guys' faces, more see what kind of humans you are, and hear some of the rationale behind some of the things we've been working on for the Space Force. And that was super cool, I'd say, so super worth it.
Have you had a chance to connect with, I mean, we talk about connection a lot, right? And we're all guardians, but there's something about, CGOs kind of, gravitates toward other CGOs and junior enlisted sometimes, right? But have you had a chance, have you bumped into any of your fellow civilian guardians?
Here, I haven't seen many other civilians actually. But what I would say about at least my squadron is it's like 9 of us in Force Ops, and there's like 200 people in Force Ops or something. So I get along really well with all of the enlisted and the officers I'm around. So
Is that 9 civilians in Force Ops?
That I work around, I guess. I don't see many of them. But the point is, it's mostly military, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of discussion on the culture piece, right? Culture of the service. And when you think about, the kind of the mixture, right? A third, and a third. And, I've been talking about, in my keynote, I talk about the Guardian experience. And I used the phrase that, I don't care if we're in a suit, whether you're wearing stars or whether you're wearing stripes, right? That the Guardian experience is something that, I think from my perspective, my advocacy applies to everybody. But I get a sense that we still have some work to do to kind of reach the vision that we have where, right, that kind of connectedness of when an officer and civilian and enlisted really get more tight-knit. Now, I think we do a much better job, to be honest, on the uniform side. I think we have some work to do on the civilian guardians on, bringing you onto the team and providing opportunities, but also understanding that just as the development for an officer is different than the development of a senior NCO and a junior enlisted, right? There are investments in civilian development we have to do as well. So I know that's been on our mind, but so from your perspective, and you've been a Space Force civilian for about a year or so.
Yep.
So so how's that journey going? I mean, so you got recruited, so to speak. You joined the Space Force civilian, and that you had the brochure, what we were going to promise you. Like how things going with that?
Yeah, I have really liked it. It's kind of like a dream first job, I would say. I love working in Force Ops. Let me think what I'm going to say. Yeah, they brought me on, and I would say like the first thing I noticed was that I couldn't understand what anyone was saying because it was all acronyms.
We're so bad with that.
But once that was out of the way, it was fine. There's some really funny acronyms, like when they get like triple nested, like an acronym is not an acronym. But I got onboarded really quick, got trained really quick. And one of the things I would say I super love about working where I work is I think that a lot of engineering jobs, if let's say I worked for a private contractor or something, can get really like office oriented and engineers can be engineers. But because I'm working around a lot of military who are, still super smart people, have the same engineering degrees I work around, they're more whole people, I would say. So they're easier to be around, they work better in teams, at least from my experience. And so I've super enjoyed like the camaraderie and the morale that comes in the office too. And I love the team I'm working with, so.
Good.
Yeah, it's been a great experience, and I'm also just like thrown into like a very complex system. There was just turnover right when I joined, so I had to pick up some slack, and I'm now like the person who's been there the longest for my engineering section. There's contractors to help.
One year.
Yeah, on the government side. So there's contractors who are subject matter experts that help. But yeah, so I've just had to get thrown in it, and yeah, it's been super fun. I really enjoy it.
So what got you to SFA? Was it something you expressed interest in coming? Did your leadership say, hey, this is a great opportunity for you? How'd you get out of it?
Yeah, I probably kind of like this podcast where it's like, oh, I guess I'll do it. Like my leadership was like, oh, we should have a civilian go. And I was like, I mean, it's Orlando, I'm not going to say no. And then they're like, fill out your DTS.
Nice.
So.
Well, I'm glad you came out. And I'm glad that your journey so far with us has been rewarding for you. Because like I said, that's really important. And, Miss Kelly, who's a senior civilian, I say that, I'm pretty sure she's a senior civilian. She's the S1 within the Space Force. In our conversations, we talk a lot about, because we talk about what are we doing for officer development, and then what are we doing for enlisted development. And then, she'll say, we also got to focus on what does that civilian development look like. And the service is taking that seriously, having a lot of discussion on it. But now we got to start kind of telling the story, kind of getting feedback, and starting to deliver on it, because it's really important.
Yeah.
Because you're all on the team, we're all guardians, but it's making sure that we continually kind of beat that drum and move out on things.
Yeah, something I've thought a lot about is I'm a pretty unique civilian. I haven't really met any other civilians that just got hired right out of college. A lot of GSs or NHs are prior military or have been in a long time, and I know it can be really hard to fill those billets sometimes and hire people. But at least for me, this is so cool coming right out of college and getting to work in space. And I know a ton of my engineer buddies I was with in college would have dreamed of a job like this too. And I know part of it is I don't have any experience, but I just think that right out of college, I was so hungry to learn, and I picked it up super fast. And I just think that I think there's probably a ton of young engineers that are graduating that would love to work and are so smart, so sharp.
Space is cool.
Yeah.
Space is cool.
That has been my experience with civilians. At the NRO, I think we hire excellent civilians to work with. And at my last duty station at Cape Cod, the civilians who worked there, Ted Khrushchev, the innovation he's doing, it's so important, like you were saying, Chief, to make them feel like valuable team members, because they are always who I go to. If I have a problem and I need to figure something out, so Jonathan, I'm so excited you're on the team, and I can tell, it's actually very cool seeing you at this part of your career, because all of the civilians I've known have been in for a long time, and they are just so involved in whatever weapon system that they're working on. And so it's really cool to see you as one of the young people that I admire so much now. Yeah. So I think so highly of all of the civilians. That, yeah. And I think you picked right.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, Kendrick, I wanted to ask you, talking about experiences, so for all of you here on the table and for all of us in podcast land, Kendrick's been kind of hanging out with the team here for a couple days. And, we did Guardian Arena over the weekend, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But also SFA has been kind of hanging out with us and had the opportunity. The General Saltzman and I did some things together, where he was kind of sitting in the background listening to some of the discussion and dialogue and some of the things that I've been doing. But kind of a little peek behind the tent, right? Of how SFA, a conference like SFA works, and then other things that, if I could say senior leaders kind of work on, and the kind of conversations. So what are your thoughts? How has this experience been for you over the last couple of days? I know you got to be exhausted, but how's that going?
Well, the exhausted part was spot on. Been getting really good sleep every night. Really long days, but really, really fun days. Every day has been a blast. I want to first highlight, sir, and your team, everyone here with your team, Second Stage. They're amazing. They put in a lot of hard work to make all the things in the background happen, and also happen on time. I know that's a good one there. We got to make sure we're following the schedule, and seeing all those different moving parts. It's been a very fun experience, and I've been getting a lot out of it. Listening in, trying to get leadership perspective. It's one thing I think about, like, as an analyst out in the field. I love my job, right? And I also love to get the other end of that. I sat when I was in Air Force, my previous chief, Chief Cheney. I sat down with her lunch one day. She offered me lunch, and she was kind of sharing me with her perspective of leadership. Yeah. And we General Saltzman brought it up today. He said, how we look at the pyramid, and he said we're more like this. She shared it that the pyramid is actually flipped upside down. That they're at the bottom and carrying up to everyone else. And I see that a lot with you when you say hold me accountable, and I see you at the bottom really looking up for everyone, making sure we can do the right things for the Space Force.
Thanks, man.
And I want to highlight too the camaraderie. Second Stage camaraderie has been amazing. I just getting time in to feel a part of a team, and not just say that, but genuinely feel a part of the team. They're always reaching out to me, asking me how I'm doing. Always saying if there's something else you want to go attend, you go do it. And they've been supportive to kind of get me into also with your behind the scenes, but also if there's something else I want to get to and just cut away from that. And I've never been to one of these before, to an SFA conference. So I've always been like, I get very passionate with Space Force. I get very nerdy and geek out at work. If I'm not working at the desk and I'm walking around with other Guardians, like we just light up and talk all day. So to get out of a skiff and to come out across here to SFA and just really just get to actually connect with other Guardians across the field, I mean, that's a huge opportunity. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, thanks for joining us. I'm glad you had a good time.
Thank you.
You said a comment about geeking out, right? You love the Space Force. And right before we started recording the podcast, I said I was holding my tongue on a couple of things because I wanted to catch it. So for the team out there listening, when I walked in the room before we started, Captain O'Hara and Kendrick were talking about ground-based radars, and you were talking about which radar has the best sensitivity at the radar sites. You were talking about which challenge have elevation, and it makes me smile, right? Because we talk about cultivating a warfighter, right? And you never met before, right? This is the first time you met, right? So within a few minutes of a couple of Guardians getting together in a room, they find out where they work and they directly go into kind of nerd speak, and I think you translate nerd speak into English. Is that what you do? That was on your thing that they sent me. But when we talk about cultivating the warfighter, that's the kind of stuff that's like, if you're not a Guardian, you walk in and are like, man, what are they talking about? Like it's like the acronym soup, right? Yeah. But But that makes me smile on the inside and the outside, because that's exactly the kind of stuff that we're talking about. So, to kind of dig at that a little bit, when we talk generally, and I specifically, cultivating the warfighter, I mean, what does that mean to you, right? As a CGO, as a senior NCO, as a junior enlisted, as a civilian, all Guardians, we talk about cultivating the warfighter. How do you internalize that? What does that mean to you?
I think it's facilitating every opportunity to get to what we imagine is like kind of in our mind's eye, like what is the perfect warfighter? What kind of space operator, intel operator, cyber operator do I need when I'm presenting forces to make the magic happen, right? And so when we're cultivating the warfighter, that's a really big ask, because what we need to do is we just need to facilitate whatever that actually is. And that could be training and development, sure. I want you to get better at your job, or maybe I need you to do something else, so I need you to get smart on this new task that I'm gonna have you do. But it could also be something like, I wanna make sure that you have the appropriate childcare, so that way when I am asking you to go get smart and do something better, that you're also not, half here right in the now, but also half thinking about how am I gonna take care of my family. Things like that. So facilitating those opportunities, whatever the right answer is to almost get to yes. I don't want to use that kind of cliche, but how do we get to that ideal warfighter?
Anyone else?
I think the Space Force is at a disadvantage from other services in finding what it is to be a warfighter. We're not doing anything hands-on. We sit behind a computer screen, and it can be very challenging for Guardians to feel motivated when they do that. We had a joke at my last unit that it was all a simulation, and they were trying to see how long we could stare at the screen and not go crazy. Right, exactly. And so it's hard to get that immediate gratification when you're not doing something hands-on. And so, to your point, Chief, earlier, it is having those conversations and getting excited with the people around you. I've done Space Flag before, and I've never been so energized. I think where we need to head in the right direction is doing those cross-organization exercises. And every time we leave those exercises, the lessons learned are always, we need better communication.
Yes.
And so finding and solving those problems is, I think, where the Space Force needs to go to develop that warfighter.
Yeah, and I'm gonna pick on that for a second, but as a civilian Guardian, right, when we say cultivate the warfighter, does that resonate with you, or do you oh, that's for the uniformed Guardian?
Well, I would say if I heard that in my squadron, I'd probably be like, oh, that's for the green suiters. But I think that when you bring it up now, I can think of things. To me, that means training the civilians or giving them something more than just like I come in and do my job and leave. And I would say that my supervisor in Force Ops has been really good about giving us a special project. We're not just there to come in and clock out. At the end of the day, we all have something we're working on to make it better, make enhancements on the system. And so that can a lot of times involve like me trying to read a book about machine learning, because who knows if I can implement that, and that to me is, really cool, cultivating civilian.
Yeah, I think that, that when we talk about cultivating a warfighter, I think it's agnostic, right? Depending on, what you wear to work every day. Like you had said, right? The civilians that you've run into in your weapon systems, like the deep thinkers and the ones who innovative things, in a lot of cases, are the civilians that have been working a weapon system for many years, but they're doing those things to make the weapon system more lethal, right? And that's kind of the war. When I think about the cultivating a warfighter, it's about the decisions, the actions are all in the frame of how do I get after the threat? How do I protect the joint and coalition forces? How do I maximize the things that we're doing all towards that end? I think from my experience, we used to approach space operations from a very engineering specific, what is the availability rate, program management type philosophy as opposed to war fighting, right? Trying to provide an effect or trying to protect forces, or our responsibility to provide options to the president, like we do now as a separate service. So some of that, cultural change is kind of thinking, outside the box and just looking at the problem set a little differently, and trying to get Guardians to kind of understand their role in it. And for many years, and I've been doing space operations for a long time, that was always a challenge for us where, even when I was doing strategic missile warning, tactical missile warning, space surveillance, I was up at Clear working on a radar there. I was at the NRO working in Aerospace Data Facility, Colorado, but always like in that windowless room looking at data a lot of times, and trying to take that experience and translate it into why are we here, what are we doing, and you actually are having an impact, right, to the warfighters that were part of the joint force. And when you're not hearing, right, from an air perspective, right, you're not hearing fighter jets or bombers flying over your head, right, or you're not loading munitions and coming back empty, or you're not on a naval aircraft carrier feeling, the spray on your face as you're going into the med. It's different for us, the type of warfighting that we're doing. But to all those things, right, to the Air Force and to the Navy and to the Marine Corps and to the Army, they have kind of communicated, like we need the Space Force to do the things that they do to allow us to, as a joint force to execute the mission. And it's a nuanced story, but it's so important that Guardians at every level, regardless of, like I said, how many stripes or stars or suit that you wear, that they kind of appreciate and understand that. And that's kind of a continuous narrative that we've been trying to get after. But it has been a struggle, because I think when people think pop culture warfighter, thinking barbed wire, Humvee, M4, that's not true in today's battle space. The battle space has changed. And I think for me, it's really important that Guardians embrace that. And yeah, like we're just in a different domain. Did any of you have a chance to attend the all call, the town hall we did this morning with General Saltzman? It was for senior NCOs are tomorrow. CGOs, junior enlisted, and I think NH4 civilians and below were invited to today. I don't know if anyone was there. I was there. So you see the video with Colonel Nick Hague, who's an astronaut, a Guardian astronaut on the space station. General Saltzman will show it tomorrow as well. But it's a video, right, where he's in the space station talking to General Saltzman on a video link. And that perspective of him in space, to think like that's our domain. I mean, it was a beautiful shot, but to think like that's what we're responsible for, right? And it seems far away in some aspects, but in reality, space is closer than we think, right? And for us as warfighters to say, yes, I'm responsible for that. I know I can't touch and feel it, but I'm a warfighter, that I'm going to own a domain that I may never touch, feel, or experience, because that's what the nation needs us to do. That's what the Joint Force needs us to do. And like I said, that's the kind of excitement and nuance that I think as Guardians, when we talk about cultivating the warfighter, I think is really important for us to get after. And that's why it's a key initiative, because I want to tell that story to everybody, because I need all of you to go to work every single day thinking that same way, to get after that. So,
if I can, yeah. So I want to add to that, talking about the warfighter and what it means to be in Space Force. I think about a couple different things. The big one being preservation of the quality of life that the nation has. To me, we are so critical to. I think we've reached the highest pinnacle of a quality of life for humanity with using space, using GPS, billions of users on timing from those GPS satellites, supporting critical infrastructure, supporting our banking system. I mean, Wall Street wouldn't like it if we had our GPS systems go down. And so protecting that, that's so important to me.
Yeah, space, like we say collectively as a service, right? It's vital to not only how we live our lives, but how we fight our wars as well. I mean, again, it's so important. It's just us being able to kind of embrace and be comfortable with that, and to understand it and continue to tell a story. I think is really important. It really is.
Chief, I have a question for you on that. I've asked this before because I recognize I don't have a lot of experience in the joint fight. I went out to Austere Challenge last year and I felt so clueless. And I don't know, and I've been trying to figure out how to, without being in a joint environment, how do you artificially understand the joint world? And what can young Guardians do to get a better understanding of that so they can wake up and feel more excited and understand what they're contributing to everyone?
Yeah, so my interaction when I talk about this war fighting and cultural aspect of being a Guardian, when I talk to the joint community and I ask them about Guardians understanding joint better, really what they've said to me is like, look, as a joint warfighter, what I need your Guardians to understand is a space domain. Like, they are waiting for us, they're looking for us to walk into the room and be the subject matter expert on space forces. So they said, I don't need you to, a soldier said, I don't need you to understand Army, I need you to understand space, because I'm going to ask you about space forces. So the first and foremost is for us to be credible and knowledgeable about our forces, our capabilities. And then once we're at rock solid in that, then it's okay. So you worked at Cape Cod. You were doing ground-based missile warning, phased array radar, also doing space surveillance. Okay, based on what you were doing, your mission set, you're a subject matter expert at it. How does that fold into, now you understand it, how does that play into what the Navy's doing? What does that bring to the Marine Corps? What is it? So understanding what we do, and then as customers and providing either support or protection to those services, be able to talk about that. That's where I think that next, how do we get better at joint, is to understand who we are as Guardians, and then that role we play in the combined fight, in the combined O plan, and bringing that all together, I think is really important. And some of that may be 2, 3, 4 threads down the kill chain, right? So it may not be the direct correlation from Cape Cod to what's going on in the AOR, but if you follow the kill chain or the mission thread for several of, whether it be space superiority, global space operations, or assured space access, I'm pretty sure you can tie it back to Cape Cod. And that if Cape Cod didn't execute that mission, somewhere that thread would break.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's the other thing that's important. As a service, we present forces. And it's not like one unit at a time, it's mission areas. And understanding the intricacies and the complementary fashion, right, of what creates that kill chain within that mission area. That's the kind of discussions and perspective that I want Guardians to kind of embrace and get after, so then you can understand, see, now I know how I fit into the joint fight. Now there's joint lexicon, there's JPP, the joint planning process. General Whiting talked about that today in his keynote. As a combatant command commander, he said, I really need Guardians to understand the joint planning process, because that is the lexicon of the joint fight. So there are things like that that we can get after with training and education. But from that warfighting culture, it's first understanding who we are, what we do, but then digging deeper is where are we on that mission thread and that kill chain. As forces, we present these kind of capabilities to the joint force. And there's a lot of work to that. But man, it is so interesting when you start thinking about it, and you talked about space flag. And that's an area where you kind of see it all together, right? Because that's when they all cross mission areas come together, and you can kind of see, are you meeting objectives if somewhere along those 3 pods, right, or somewhere along the deltas that are there, someone has a cyber attack and loses capability, or someone didn't mission plan appropriately, the whole thing, a house of cards could fall apart. And that's kind of some of the stuff that I think from a warfighting perspective is really important. And so that was a really good discussion. I'm glad we got a chance to do that. Hey, I also want to talk about real quick, if I could, shifting gears a little bit. So in my discussion yesterday, I used that opportunity on stage to kind of highlight, the guardians that are getting after my key initiatives and creating the guardian experience. Rather than me giving update, hey, what am I doing? To kind of recognize the men and women that are getting after it for all of us. And I use that phrase recognition for a specific reason. I put out, unveiled yesterday what we call the Beeline, which is kind of a paper we decided to put out as a team to kind of talk about different topics and subjects. And yesterday's Beeline was about recognition, right? And culturally, from a service, like, how do we recognize each other as teammates? Like, what does that mean? Is there value added in that? I recently sat on a Polaris board, so it made me think about, right, as a pinnacle award for the service, sitting on a Polaris board kind of made me think about how we do recognition, how we look at recognition across the service. So that's why I wanted to use the Beeline to kind of talk about some of that. But, but from from where you sit, I mean, you've been a year now, right, as a government civilian, or a guardian civilian. Barnes, you've been, right, both on the Air Force, Space Force for a while. So we've all had some experience, but, as team leaders and as team members, how do you view like recognition? Like, what does that mean to you? What's meaningful to you that as part of a team that you feel as if you're appreciated and recognized and your efforts are acknowledged? So I'm gonna throw that out there and see who wants to talk about that.
Dibs. I'm gonna steal it from you, Specialist Barnes. Chief, been around a while, played the game for a bit, and I'll say as a first sergeant, one of my absolute favorite things about the job is recognizing our teammates. It's much better than the other half if it was a pendulum that swings the opposite direction of having civilian selects, And so, but what's really great, and I know everybody wants to be recognized differently. A quarterly award is going to mean something different to everyone, right? For me personally, I like going and finding teammates, and a quick fist bump and "you're doing awesome" it's simple, it's fast, but I think personally what I'm trying to do is recognize the individual and their contributions, of course, but it's also that human interaction to say you're doing an awesome job. And I appreciate what you're doing. And then all the way up to the Polaris Awards, where we're really identifying the movers and shakers of our service, who have just gone so far beyond what we expect of them, especially when it comes to the 4 Cs, that we've created an entirely different award system almost compared to what I'm used to from the Air Force days. And so between just a simple fist bump and a service level award, though, I believe that finding the things that people value most, and as that frontline leader, being able to identify this for Specialist Barnes, the way that I'm going to improve that quality of service that we talk about for him is going to be, he likes being on those projects that he gets put on. He likes to be recognized just with a verbal attaboy. Good job. That was awesome. Thanks for being awesome.
So many projects.
So many projects. Where then I realized that for John, our teammate here, it's that little bit of extra recognition quarterly where I can get him up in front of the entire squadron and recognize him in front of 200 people and nine civilian teammates to say, look at what this guy just did. Whereas maybe Specialist Barnes isn't necessarily a big fan of that, but it's that personal interaction that he really likes. So I think as frontline leaders, it's our job to identify that with our people, to figure out what do you value more and what's going to improve that quality of service.
Anyone else?
Go ahead.
You take it.
So we talked about this at my squadron, and my flight commander asked a group of us, and it's interesting you bring that up, different variants of what people like and for recognition. Some people, from what I was hearing, some people didn't want to be recognized. Some people just wanted to do their job, do a good job, and then call it a day. Some people wanted that quarterly award. And then I'll speak for myself. The little things matter, little interactions, taking time to go over to talk to someone. and even informal recognition, right? Informal recognition of even just the person themselves, the job aside, things like that matter to me. And another one that I wanted to highlight from responses from my flight commander when he asked this is some people want their time back. So we've actually, we introduced kind of like giving them comp days, and if through recognition of hard work, and that's another thing that it goes a long ways. Guardians get the time to rest, they get personal time, and they come back and they're excited to work.
Chief, this is I feel pretty strong about this topic, actually. Connection has always been my favorite of the C's, and I think that ties very heavily into belonging. And if you don't feel like you belong in an organization, it's very easy to leave. I recently have had a few like at work things, at home things that have made me go like, do I want to stay in? And if it weren't for the people who are around me and my leaders and the recognition I do receive, it would be so much easier to say, no, I don't belong. Because a lot of times things do happen where you don't feel like you're a valued member of the team and it makes you want to leave. But then you have someone who says, hey, I saw the work you're putting in. I see the struggles you're going through. So maybe it's not even recognizing a good thing. It's someone recognizing a struggle you're going through. And I think that piece is huge. And like you said, it doesn't need to be big. It can be an email. It can be a chat at work. Hey, I see you. I see what you're going through. And I think that's huge, and we need to do that more. And it doesn't need to be grand. It doesn't need to be a Polaris award to get people to stay in. It needs to be those interactions we have every day.
Yeah. You don't need a formal program to make someone feel like they belong to an organization. And I think and that was kind of, I think, the sense of the message, right? Is that, there is a place for formalized programs and processes, but that shouldn't be the only thing that we use as a mechanism and even as sequencing and timing to recognize Guardians and the efforts and the impact they have on the team. Like, you talked about, once a quarter, bringing up somebody to recognize them in front of the 200 military members and the 9 civilians. But under a lot of formal programs, like you're forced to select one person to bring up, right? But if it's just, hey, this is just our informal way. So, hey, the six of you guys are doing great. I just want to recognize all 6 of you guys, right? Or it's for 1 month, right? But it gives leaders at all levels, whether you're a team leader of 4 or 5 people or at the squadron level, that kind of recognition, that culture, I think is really important. Not bound ourselves by, well, you have to have a program to do that. I just, I want to make sure that we're looking at things differently, creating some of that culture. But Jonathan, I do want to ask you, right? So a lot of times when we talk about awards and recognitions, I'll be honest, right? A lot of times it's a big, uniformed involvement. Like for many years, and I've served, in leadership levels, leadership positions, all different levels. And we always had like phenomenal civilians that were on the team. And we would have a specific civilian category. And we'd say, hey, for this month, this year, or this quarter, these are the awards and these are the categories of civilians. And sometimes like no one would participate, right? You wouldn't have any nominees when you had individuals. And I don't know whether it was, and I've never been a government civilian, but if it's don't see value in them or don't understand them, but for your experience, and you've been doing this for a little over a year, we talk recognition, and what has your experience been with recognition as a Guardian in the Space Force?
Well, I actually think my squadron does a pretty good job of giving awards regularly to the civilians. But I would say though, it's really cool to, let's get a Delta award. I have like this cool, looks like a big marble or something, and has my name engraved on it. I don't know. I'm like, it's on my shelf. Cool, I got an award. But the thing about that is if let's say I lose at the SPAC level, I lose at Delta level, it's like, someone just wrote a better bullet, had bigger numbers or something. But if my supervisor, my flight commander is like, hey, good job, what you guys were saying. Yeah. And that could just be a personal preference thing. It's like, they didn't have to go through some effort or beat anyone else. They just saw, they didn't have to do that at all. Like, they just went out of their way to tell me I'm kicking butt, you know? So yeah, I think that means a lot to me, and just people recognizing what I'm going through. It's a little different for civilians with, you know, comp time and stuff, but I mean, just rewards like that when you can be recognized when you're working extra hard, going above and beyond, doing more than your duty, that means a lot to me for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because, you know, like I said, holistically, you know, the discussion on recognition and how you kind of do that, it's a cultural thing, right? So, you know, we have been very deliberate on, you know, programs that we've adopted and, you know, ones that we've created, but overarchingly, you know, to not use it as a default mechanism that's the, you know, to create connection within the Space Force, you have to have these programs and stuff. I don't necessarily want us to go down that path, where I want it to be just like all of you said, like, I just want to be, like, I feel like I belong, you know, and I just want people to kind of maybe recognize that I'm putting in an effort, or, you know, maybe I'm having a hard time, and the little, hey, I kind of see I appreciate the effort you put in. I know you're struggling. I really do appreciate what you're trying to do for the team, you know, or do you need help, right? That part of that connection and belonging is so important to the culture that we're trying to build. And you know, yesterday, you know, when I talked about, you know, creating the future, how important that is, and that's a key initiative. But all the discussion and emphasis we put on creating the future, if we don't protect the present, it's going to be for naught, right? So this all goes into, right, the culture of protecting the present, where if you feel like there's belonging, you feel like you're appreciated, you feel like you're connected to your teammates, I think this adds another layer of protection for the present, and kind of creates the, like you said, that environment that I think that we all can succeed in. So I appreciate the feedback, because that was one of the reasons we went back and forth on the beeline on what is the right way to kind of capture this kind of discussion on recognition, that it hit the right tone, and the thoughts rolling around in my head were able to be captured on one document, one page, to be out there. And you know, having all of you here for this podcast to talk about this, to kind of kick that around and get your perspectives, has been really helpful to do that. So thanks for sharing that with us, because that's important. And like I said, I spoke a little bit about that yesterday. You know, the other thing that kind of came out yesterday, and this is what General Salsom talked about, was the space truths. Did you get a chance to kind of get those and hear him talk about those, the space truths? So essentially, you know, it's kind of like, again, and this kind of continues the discussion about the identity of kind of who we are and kind of why we're doing it. And, you know, I appreciate General Salsom, because she has the ability to kind of put things in perspective in a way that I think the large audience can kind of grasp onto and understand. Like, we need to talk at the highest levels, he can do that. But also, he has this grace and ability to kind of put things in a way that I think many of us can, oh yeah, that's a great way to kind of paint that picture, articulate that, allows me to kind of embrace that at whatever level, wherever we are in our journey, and understand it. So I'm glad he kind of put those out, because again, it kind of gives us shape and kind of who we are and kind of what we're doing. But I really like, you know, and this goes to how do we fit our warfighter, how we fit into the joint fight, you know, that, you know, space forces are critical to how we live our lives, and also to the, you know, how we fight our wars. And all these things that we've been saying in kind of 6 simple bullets, internal messaging to us to help to continue to define who we are as Guardians, I think is real important. But I don't know if you had a chance to read or hear his speech, if you had any kind of thought. If not, all right.
It's a constant challenge to defeat one of Netflix's best television shows that just happens to share a similar name. So while it's a great reminder for us that are, you know, part of the Department of Defense, to say, you know, here's kind of why we do it, or the things that we're trying to get after. Just adding it to more communication to anybody outside the base gate, to say, you know, hey, this is what we're bringing to the table. This is what we're trying to do as a military to protect and keep sacred and things like that. So while like I said, 5 stars to that television show. We're a little bit more than just, you know, a little comedy aspect. So I think just like the lexicon, the how-to Space Force document that came out a few months ago, which thankfully I saw go all over social media, trying to get it as far and wide as possible. Adding to
Is
that,
it the Space Force 101?
101,
Yep.
yes, sir.
Yep.
So adding to that, just more communications out there that hopefully it just ends up on someone's social media feed, so they can learn a little bit more about what we do, to be able to delineate between the comedy and the real life reality that we do as operators.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? That's fine. We're just kicking it around. But you know, you mentioned the Space Force, the TV show, and Jonathan, you kind of laughed a little bit. So I have to ask, all right. So as you were, you know, coming out of college and, you know, looking to be, you know, kind of coming into the Space Force as a civilian, did you watch the show?
I had watched the show, actually. Yes. I'd watched season 1. I wasn't even that big of a fan of the show, but I moved to Colorado Springs after college without having a job. And I started just applying to like anything and everything. And I was like, what's the Space Force? And then I applied and got a job offer, so.
But I mean, when you say that, I mean, what's the Space Force? I mean, were you witting and aware that the Space Force was a military brand?
No, I did not know.
Yeah, and you went to school in Seattle.
Yeah, I know.
I
right
mean,
next to
Vandenberg
Vandenberg.
Space Force Base is right down the road.
Yeah.
Where they launch rockets.
Maybe I just lived under a rock. I don't know, or I was just taking too many tests.
Just doing the markets on Thursday night.
Yeah. But no, it was really cool.
But this goes to the discussion you had about telling the story of the Space Force is a thing. We're going to be 5 years old this month. 5 years old, and there's still pockets of great Americans that are passionate about our nation and serving that still maybe don't know that we're there, that we exist. But I think once they find out, they say, "What's the Space Force thing?" And now you're hooked.
Yeah.
And now you're like loving what you're doing. You're saying, "Hey, a lot of your classmates are like, man, it's pretty cool that the stuff that they're doing."
Yeah.
So it goes to say, right? I mean, space is cool. Space is closer than we think, and for us as guardians, for all of us, to kind of embrace that, appreciate it, understand it, and for all of us to kind of take on the responsibility to continue to kind of tell that story, right? Of this is, coming up on a birthday, 5 years into this journey, this is who we are. This is what we do. We're the 6th branch of the Department of Defense. We're part of the Joint Fight. We are war fighters for the nation. And then we own that domain. We're responsible for it. And we're okay with that. Like we have a passion for it. We're primarily like employed in place, like all the things that, hey, it's different. Like we're not jumping out of helicopters, right? We don't have the sea spray on our faces, but that's fine, right? We're guardians and we're vital to the nation, and building that culture and understanding and running with that, I think is really important as we continue to build our identity for guardians, by guardians, coming up on this 5th birthday and going into, next year, I think is really important. So I think we're out of time. I'm getting a hack here, but I just want to thank you. Thank you all for kind of coming out, sharing your kind of time with me today, and sharing your perspective and kind of helping me work through some of my thoughts and giving me some feedback is really helpful to me and the team. But also, hopefully, everyone kind of listening also kind of glean something right from your perspective, because that's what it's about. It's about the dialogue. Guardians getting together, talking, and seeing what is happening and sharing perspectives, and sometimes maybe differing of opinions. That's okay. So with that, I think we'll sign off on the podcast, and until next time, I'll get a chance to talk to the Guardians and the people out there soon. I appreciate y'all. Semper Super. This is the way.